Okay, well, let's, I believe it's time to go ahead and get started.
Looks like Cindy is just logging on to Zoom.
Oh, Cindy's logging on. Okay. And Karen's gonna be late, you're saying?
That's what she told me, yeah,
Okay.
and I don't know if she's coming in person or online.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman, Ms. Kaminsky,
We can't hear us.
Here.
You're muted, Cindy.
Okay, can you hear me?
yes, are you here? Mr. Suda, and Mr. Gentili.
Here.
Okay, after discussion about late mail and so on, I hope everybody has gotten the agenda and has a chance to review it. If there's any changes or comments, say so now, otherwise, we will make a motion that somebody make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Public comment? Don't see anybody, don't hear anybody, so we'll move on. Next item on the agenda is approval of last month's meeting minutes. And I assume everybody has gotten a copy and has had a chance to read it. Yeah, included in that was our fiscal report that was reported on by the fella in Grand Rapids, and now we've got the hard copy. And I hope everyone has a chance to read it through completely.
Word for word.
Okay, good, sounds good. Any comments, questions, changes on last month's meeting minutes? Okay, I do have a couple myself, and probably directed to Susan. Someplace in there, somebody had asked, and was in the notes, about did we get sufficient detail to resolve the 258% overrun on the miscellaneous supplies?
Sent that to everybody's email today.
There was an email this morning on that.
But I do
Oh.
have a copy
With the
for you.
report.
So everybody's got it, it's taken care of,
There you go.
okay,
Can I have
okay,
Yeah, I couldn't open mine.
okay. I think you're the one that asked about it.
Yeah, I saw the email this morning and read it.
Okay, good, I didn't see it, so that's good, thank you. Another item, my question was, did we or are we able to establish an airport capital project fund as described in our last meeting? Susan, did we?
Yeah, I set that up, so it's gonna be Fund 481.
Okay,
So you can do you can budget a transfer into that. What was that number again? 481, yeah. So when I'm assuming next month you're gonna approve the regular airport,
mm-hmm,
you need to also approve that Fund 481.
Okay. So should that have a separate budget for it?
It does, so what I
Okay.
did is I put in what you budgeted to transfer out, changed that name to, transfer out airport capital fund is the name of it. And then, have to let me know, do you want it, what expense line item you want it to go to? I put two in there, equipment and then, contractual or contract, so.
Okay. So for next month, when we approve a final
Mhm.
budget, should there
Yeah,
be two budgets prepared,
Yeah.
one for each of those
mhm,
funds?
and I'll send that to you,
Okay,
so that
okay,
way you'll have it printed off,
okay,
okay?
thanks.
okay, thank you, Susan.
Yep.
That's it on my comments on last month's minutes. Any other comments? Otherwise, I will request a motion to approve the minutes as presented for July 19, 2020.
You mean as amended, correct?
Oh, no, there was no amendments, just a question.
Oh, okay.
Those, Jeff, those are just questions.
Yep, all right, thank you.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Sure.
Okay. Roll call, please. Okay,
Roll call.
those in favor, say aye.
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 Those against, say nay. Approved as presented. Moving on to the treasurer's report. We've got the July 2021 accounts payable. I presume everybody's gotten a copy of that or seen a copy of it, has had a chance to review it. Any questions, comments? Go ahead, Phil.
Am I seeing something, or is there no price here for the 5 yards of mulch on the very top?
I think I'm gonna guess that might be a
Oh,
misprint of
Yeah,
some
that was
sort.
just from last month,
Right,
but, so yeah, it's just zero.
it
There was
showed up,
nothing for
right.
this month.
Thought it was a trick.
No, we also lost the lines coming across in the top ones,
Yeah. My printer was, I guess,
but the 5 yards of mulch showed up last month in
Yeah.
June's deal.
so it's just zero.
Right, and I think that was like $450 if I recall, something like that. Any other comments? If not, I would like to have a motion to approve the July 2021 accounts payable as presented.
Motion to approve the July 2021 accounts payable as presented.
Do I hear a second on that?
I'll second it.
I'll
Okay.
second.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
We got Phil and Cindy to second it.
I'll take Phil, he was quicker.
Okay. Now that we need a roll call, right, Julie?
Yes.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky,
Yes.
Hawes.
Yes. Next item up is the, 2021 financial statement, revenues and expenses, trial balance sheet, and the other additional, pages talking about, Orchard Beach Aviation rent and, fuel sales.
I did have a comment, and it actually goes back to the miscellaneous supplies detail. I think everyone either got a copy or looked at the email. I just kinda wanted to talk about a couple things. So there are two big items on there, most things are, monthly, expenses, but there are two big items. One to Darley, which is $1,200, and that's basically for an additional set of turnout gear. As we trained new, staff for firefighting, as they brought on, what we had didn't fit, so we needed to acquire a new set of turnout gear, so that's, that $1,200. And then the other item, the $2,191, actually, probably should be in a different account.
Wondered about
There's
that.
training firefighter account, and that's really where that item should go.
Oh, is that a reimbursing?
And
Should it be
the
reimbursed?
check actually is in what I just
Okay.
handed you for
Okay.
the reimbursement on that.
Okay. I'll just do a journal entry and move it.
Going back with the pants and coat for the turnout gear, did our employees get larger or bigger or smaller or what?
Well, when we lost Jeff last year,
We were
brought
sized for him.
Dean on, and Jeff was a very
Okay.
short,
Okay,
small individual.
okay,
so-
got it. Any other comments, questions?
And I know I should know this, but I apologize. 14.2, was that for the equipment, was that for the fuel tank or the cameras?
Yes, that's the fuel system monitor, invoice finally coming through on that.
Okay. Andrew, does that answer your question there? One thing else I noticed that came through someplace over here, and I kind of like that, with respect to the $50,000,
Oh,
you
yeah,
broke that out for it to show us where
I
that was
did,
still
yep.
sitting.
yeah.
So that,
So then I actually have the award amount now, and then the remaining, so then like every time it'll be like this. I'll give you an updated one, since you're the chair.
So,
I just didn't have the, full dollar amount of the grant, so I always like to put in the award amount,
oh,
the amount
okay,
spent, so then you can see the remaining. And then there's a line for the reimbursement, so once we get reimbursed, I'll put totals in there so we can see where we're at.
yeah.
Anybody else?
So the difference between
On
what
the
she
table?
just handed you and what was in the report is there's a couple additional numbers at the top
Yeah.
that show that.
Okay, well, Susan, thank you.
Yep.
Barry, last month you mentioned that there was a issue with the telephone bill. You had to get that cleaned up. Now this month I noticed there's no monthly charge.
So what happened is we, the contract was up with AT&T. So, they billed us a full amount that we paid, and now we have a credit with AT&T. So we won't see, any expenses there for a while, but at the end of the year, I'm going to do a journal entry to carry some of that forward, because I've done it all for this year. So I'll try and figure out what the amount should have been for this year, our true expense, clean that up, and then carry the rest of the credit forward. So that line item should be where it should be at the end of the year. So. And I can give you that credit amount, I just don't remember what it is, because it was for all of our AT&T accounts, not just the airport, so.
For the whole county then you're talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah.
Okay.
So we shouldn't see any more actual expense in
No.
there for the remainder of the year, and then at the
Right.
fiscal year end, you'll just carry
Right.
the credit over.
Right, yep.
All set, Andrew?
Yep.
Okay. If there's no further questions, would I have an motion to approve the July 2021 revenues and expenses, trial balance sheet, and the remaining two items, Orchard Beach Aviation rent and fuel?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Cindy. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Julie, roll call, please.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Haas,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili.
Yes.
Okay, moving on. Committee reports and discussion. No executive committee meeting this past month. No budget committee meeting this past month, nor capital projects committee meeting. So Barry, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, actually, I'll mention it now, because I didn't include it in my report, but looking at budget committee. So one of the items that came out of budget process, I did present to the county commissioners at their budget work session a week ago, and just kind of try to build awareness of where we are and kind of our current as well as future needs. So that's in process, and, you know, I don't know what the plan is for the county's final budget, so when we'll know our final number, but I'm expecting it to be the smaller number, than what we had budgeted originally. So, does anyone know?
Let me interject here for a second, Barry.
Okay.
I just had a conversation with Lisa this morning, and you can probably figure on the probability is high that that extra 10 that you requested will go in. We had a change of events and funding for a position at the sheriff's department to where it's 100% grant funded, so we'll be able to possibly make that adjustment. Again, it's not set in stone, but probability is high.
That's good news, thank you.
Yes.
Do we need to have another budget committee meeting before the next meeting, or are we good to go with?
With that information, I don't think there would be any changes that I'm aware of that would require a committee meeting. But for the next meeting, I'll bring back, with Susan's help, kind of everything finally for final approval. I guess I do have one more question as it just relates to overall county planning and budgeting. And that is, I believe the county is doing a new job salary study. And I was curious, and I think maybe I mentioned this in the past, or at least I had intended to. It would probably be nice, or it would certainly be nice from my perspective, if some of the airport roles were included in that, so there would be some knowledge for the board as to what appropriate compensation might be. And I don't know where that plan is in the process and how to get on that list. Probably just me talking to Lisa, but I just wanted Jeff and or Karen's, I don't think on yet, your thought on whether that would be appropriate or not.
Well, what I would tell you, Barry, is to contact Lisa and have that discussion.
Okay. Will do then. Okay,
Oh, one more thing, when we're talking about Andrew, you're talking about the capital, the budget meeting and so on, you know, the last one we left still had the 130 on it. For our budget. So Jeff was just talking, the deal coming back from the county is gonna be 130 next year versus 120. So it really hasn't changed in what we presented so far.
That's what Barry was saying, so if there's no
Right.
changes, then there's no need to meet. I just didn't know if there were any other changes
Right.
that Barry or you had that, did we need to get together again just to finalize any changes before the approval process, but it sounds like it's not needed.
no, I'm
Correct.
not aware of anything.
Right. Okay, go ahead, Barry.
Okay, moving on to my report. Oh, I should have, that's wrong. It's wrong.
Phil?
So there are no accidents or incidents, in the last month to report. Earlier this, I guess it was late spring, we had the first half of our annual airport inspection, and that was the paperwork inspection, which was all done remotely. Today, the second half of the inspection is being conducted, which is the on-site inspection, that's basically looking at the airfield. They cover basically pavements, lighting, fuel farm, fire truck, basically the physical things here, and making sure we're in compliance with everything physically. And the inspector is basically said he'd be here right after this meeting, so I'm gonna roll from this into that. I'm confident that things are in good shape. I think they're actually the best shape that I've had them in, from any inspection that I've done. I mean, every single light, I'm knock on wood as I say that, because one will have burned out, but as of last night and this morning, every single light was working, which is sometimes hard to achieve. Part of the inspection, you're given like a percentage of lights that can be out, so it's not a requirement that every light be working, but we're all working.
So what is the percentage you're talking about? 90%?
I think it's 95%,
Okay.
but there are qualifications, no two consecutive lights can be out,
Okay.
and things like that. The local revenue sharing grant, so the security system is mostly installed. They were here 2 or 3 weeks ago and installed 9 of the 10 cameras, and then all the equipment. So the system is operating. The one camera that is intended to be installed pointing out on the ramp is back ordered, so they're still waiting for that camera to come in. because they haven't finished the project, I haven't received my training on how to use the system, but it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, they've showed me the app and how to access things, but basic things like what is our recording window, I don't know the answer to that. I think it's on the order of a few weeks, but I'm not 100% sure. So that's where that stands, and, you know, once that wraps up and we get the invoice, then we can get that submitted, back to reimbursement through the revenue sharing, grant. There's been 2 or 3 back and forth with various people online with consumers on trying to explain what we're trying to do, and still haven't yet gotten to the right person that can understand what we're trying to do, so that's still ongoing. And then I was out to visit with Cape Air for 2 days, a little over a week ago, so I guess now technically 2 weeks ago. And I think the meetings were very constructive. I learned a lot, about how they operate, and it confirmed certain things that I had assumed, but also, I think, filled me in on some things I didn't know about. I went with a pretty long list of questions, spent 4 hours one day and then 3 hours the next day, occupying their time. And, you know, I think after that visit, I think the amount of interaction that I need with them will go down, just because I've now got a full understanding as to who the people are, met with them, what their roles are, how they do things, whereas up until now, it's all been, you know, phone calls, and you just don't get quite the same level of understanding of an organization, except when you're kind of there, immersed in it. So overall, it was good. I, at the same time, think I did push a few buttons, maybe a little too hard. And I think how we have been operating are different than any other city they have. It did come up once or twice that, well, you're the airport, you should focus on airport stuff and let us as the airline do our job. So, you know, I was asking pointed questions about things, and I got a little pushback on that. And again, I think it's because we're different, because for the last 8 years, or, you know, the prior carrier, we essentially were half the airline, in that process. So they're a little bit struggling to figure out how to work with us, and in some ways, you know, I'm having to adjust my expectations as well. And I think part of the issue is that there are issues, and, you know, that's causing, concerns. I don't know if Cindy is going to give an update on her, experience with Cape Air, but I know it wasn't the best experience it could have been when she flew, last month. So, there are some issues, and, everything was going smoothly. I don't think any of the questions, I wouldn't be asking any questions, quite frankly. So, overall good, with those caveats. No update on, law enforcement coverage. The state fuel inspector did finally show up. I've still got a couple follow-up items. Contact with Northern Pump about our new fuel system monitor, that there are certain inspections that they're supposed to do, and I don't have paperwork on, and just a couple of little things that just need to get wrapped up. But overall, that was fine, especially since we had the new fuel monitor. If we didn't, we would have not been in a good position. Also, state boiler inspection, we were out of date with our CSD or CDS1, custom sheet metal came in, did that, so those are now, complete.
what boiler are we talking about? For
We've
the
got
heating system?
3 boilers, 2 in the terminal here, and then 1 out, in the
For the
truck
heating
barn
system.
for heating. yes.
Okay,
The Manistee Township zoning, so the master plan is still working its way through their internal process. A draft went to the board for their meeting last week. They actually sent it back to the planning commission to do one more pass. It will come back to the board, next month, which then will schedule a public hearing and various other steps in that overall process. But the current draft does have the required language that, we were looking for that references the airport approach plan as required by the state. So I'm happy with where it is. So, you know, that step is out of the way. Once the master plan is approved, then the next step will be to go back to the zoning administrator for Manistee Township and then start trying to address the issues with the zoning ordinance as it relates to the, airport, which is the next hurdle, but this is the one that's currently in process. Moving on to, Emplainments and on-time performance. So I do not have yet from Cape Air official numbers for July. The person from Cape Air that provides those to me has been on vacation. I think he got back either late last week or today, so I have not yet received those. But they're on the order of around 1,500 total passengers for the month, which is, as I was predicting, down from our historic highs with public charters in North Country Sky, where we were doing on the order of 1,700 to 1,800 a month. So 1,500 is down from that. Just quite frankly, we do not have the capacity with 4 flights a day at 8 passengers to achieve, you know, much more than that 1,500 number. We could probably max out at about 1,600. For most of July, they were doing 90% load factor, so 90% of all seats were filled, which is actually, from our historic norms, we previously would never get it really above 75%, just because of the nature of our tourism, people coming up for the weekend. There's a much larger inflow on Thursday and Friday and outflow on Monday and Tuesday, that you generally have empty seats in the non-commute direction. They're filling seats just because there's not the capacity, so they're not hitting the demand that's attempting to come up and return during those peak days. This was one of the topics that I had with them in my meetings out there, really, you know, conveying to them that if they wanted to be in a position next year to renew their contract, that is something that we would be looking at, is making sure that we had the capacity to at least handle our historic demand peaks in July and August, which we can't do right now. So that is that. On the performance, we had, I think it was a total of 9 flights in July that were canceled, which equates to roughly 4%, with a 20% delay factor. And unlike what I've said in the past in our previous carrier, a lot of times delays were, you know, minor delays, 30-minute delay here, 30-minute delay there. The Cape Air delays tend to be more longer, a couple hours here. There's still obviously some that fall into that, you know, shorter delay, but, more of them have been on the longer side, which has been the potential for a greater impact to a traveling passenger. During much of July, most of the aircraft that were operating were not Technams. They basically, most of the Technams were not operating for much of the month of July as they were going through various maintenance, changes. The way it's been described to me, in my visit, is with the new aircraft like the Technam, as they're getting real-world experience, they're taking that experience and making modifications back at the factory to how they're building it. But then they have to go into the field and retrofit whatever change happens to all existing bodies so that everything is ultimately the same, as opposed to, if you're, serial number less than 10, you've got, these differences versus this range versus this range. So a lot of that work was being done in St. Louis in July as they were basically incorporating a bunch of updates and upgrades that are being rolled out into all the new aircraft to the older ones.
Well, that's something I would have never thought about, with a new plane, because when we brought them on board, I think I said anyway, wow, a new plane, this is gonna be great. But now we're going through all these changes and stuff like that.
There aren't a lot of new airline type aircraft that get introduced. But, if you go back over the last 5 years, Boeing has certainly had its challenges, as it's launched new aircraft. Even going back a decade when Boeing launched the 787, there were many issues on that. So this isn't necessarily atypical, but it's also not something I think myself or I think probably any of us were expecting when, a year ago when we were looking forward to Cape Air starting.
Well, it's one of those things, it's fine for the other guy to deal with it, but I don't wanna deal with it. Okay.
Okay then, moving on to airfares. So the last couple months, as we've been kind of going through summer, our airfares have been high, and Traverse Cities have been historically low. Traverse City is just booming right now. When I went out to Cape Air, I flew out of Traverse City because it was $200 cheaper than flying out of here. In fact, the return flight from Boston to Traverse City, was that leg was priced at $88, which is less than Cape Air from here to Chicago. So it just, the airlines have added so much capacity into Traverse City this summer, that an airfare like that shows there's probably too much capacity because they're struggling to fill the seats at a reasonable fare, so they're having to discount. But the TSA manager that oversees TSA at our airport, he's out of the Traverse City office, and he was in here on Friday, and, I mentioned to him that I'd flown out of Traverse City, and he said, which days? And it's like, well, I came back on Saturday, and it's like, oh, that Saturday is the worst. Between 1 p.m. and 5 p.m., they have 16 flights going in or coming out of Traverse City in that 4-hour time period. Our flight was delayed a couple hours, so we came in about 7, and the terminal was just jam-packed with people. They are really bursting out of the seams with the capacity they have, which has been what we've seen here on an airfare side, is it's just depressed airfares. So as we now move into shoulder season, these fairs are looking, at travel toward the end of September. Things are normalizing out a little bit. One of the things that's driving a lot of that is the Cape Air fares are much lower than they were during the summer. So, and it all ties together. So as I said earlier, we don't have enough capacity to meet our summer demand. But that means that Cape Air can raise fares during the summer because, if we're 90% full, that basically means every flight's got one seat left. That last seat for that last person booking is going to be much higher priced. So the previous month's report on this, the fare from Cape Air round trip to Chicago was, the lowest I could find was $179. Now we're down to $109. That $70 ends up really getting applied across all of the routes, and therefore that lowers our average by $70 there. So that alone goes a long way to reducing the gap. But as you can see down here at the bottom, our average fare dropped by $126, which is roughly a third from where it was last month. Traverse City, $86, Grand Rapids, $33, and Muskegon, roughly $30. So what you expect as you get into the shoulder season, fares start coming down from the peak demand of summer. We came down more though, and then basically, eliminated that gap. So we're basically neck and neck with Traverse City on average now looking into the fall, which is a better position than we were. Grand Rapids, as one would expect, is in the majority of routes the least expensive, and Muskegon generally is the most expensive on every route. And I'll mention that because, as we're 6 months away from starting a new bid cycle with DOT for our next 2-year contract for EAS. And, we know what Cape Air is capable of, and we know also what their issues are. SkyWest has been somebody that we've really wanted to, hopefully would engage with us, and SkyWest is the carrier out of Muskegon. And, that is a concern that, you may make that trade-off of shiny jet, fewer flights, but more seats total, but an overall significantly higher fare. That's a risk we would potentially run down that path. But at the same time, that may be worth it, depending on all the other factors. So, one thing that I noticed as I was updating my report this month is I hadn't adjusted, or I hadn't looked at what parking was at the various airports in a while. And since I had last looked, Traverse City has raised their rates, so that actually, when you include some parking for a trip in the fare, that shifts things even more in our favor, because right now, for 7 days a week trip, Traverse City is $63, and both Grand Rapids and Muskegon are $70 for parking, which completely eliminates the delta in fare from all of those airports, and makes us be a reasonable comparison if you need to pay for parking. And at Grand Rapids, it's amazing that if you actually park in their garage, I think it's $24 a day. 18. I mean, this is the economy lot at $10 a day. Any questions on airfares or any of this data?
No.
Okay. I don't have any updates on either of the two, FAA-funded capital projects, our layout plan or the PFAS testing. I know Prina Newhoff is still working on the airport layout plan, but I haven't had any involvement in that process in the last month, although I did get an email this morning, from them that they do need my input on something now. PFAS testing, as I reported last month, the revised phase 2 plan has been submitted to Eagle, and we haven't heard anything back from them on whether they approve it, whether we have to go ahead to do it or not. So that's just on hold until Eagle responds. Here on overall airline performance issues, I've probably touched on all of these earlier. I didn't really get into as much some of the why on the issues. Right now, there's really two things that are combining to cause performance issues for the airline. One is, I would say, the less than stellar availability of the technims for basically being as reliable as they should be. But the other is just general O'Hare summer weather issues. Last week especially, we had a line of thunderstorms come through pretty much every afternoon. And you get thunderstorms anywhere near O'Hare, and that immediately causes 2-hour ground holds on everything coming in. And for our afternoon flights, the crew will time out if they're delayed more than an hour and a half. So if O'Hare puts in a 2-hour hold, we end up canceling because the crew will time out for that second rotation. So, that's been causing a number of issues, is just the weather rolling through. I looked, and this is one of the things I discussed with Cape Air while I was out there, I looked back for the entire calendar year, and of the canceled flights we've had, about 10% of the canceled flights have been in the morning, so the early morning rotations. There were 3 during the entire period through the end of July. The other 90% have all been in the afternoon. So Cape Air is able to get flights out in the morning reliably. It's just the afternoon has been the issue, and that's some probably mechanical issue, but the other is just the afternoons is when thunderstorms occur. So it's that combination that's been tricky. We're not the only airport that gets impacted by this. I know last week we had American passengers drive down from Traverse City because their flight out of Traverse City was canceled and they were rebooked out of here. So it does happen both ways, but I think it's been impacting us more. I think we've shipped a lot more passengers up to Traverse City than they've ended up shipping down here this year.
But even if we're still going to Midway, I suspect we'd probably have most of the same problem with the weather in Midway.
Midway doesn't have as much the blanket just holds for incoming aircraft. Airlines might. So Southwest would, weather coming through may cause Southwest to delay at Midway, but it's generally not going to hold up everybody. You can get in, you can get in. O'Hare's just got such a higher level of traffic that any little hiccup, they stop, hold people at their, originating airport so that we can work through this, so that we don't have all these planes in the air, then adding additional congestion.
So it's a traffic concentration more than the weather.
Yes,
Okay,
weather is the hiccup that
right.
prevents, you know, things being able to operate at the rate that they have.
What I've seen lately is more, it's a staffing issue. 2 weeks ago, I got stuck in Midway for 4.5 hours because the plane was there, but the flight crew wasn't.
So
And because of the timeout issues,
Yep,
they were able to replace the plane. The original plane apparently had a mechanical issue. They were able to replace the plane, but they had no backup crew.
hmm.
So I sat there for 4.5 hours until the original crew finally showed up to get on the plane.
It's kind of like half a dozen of one and 6 of the other, sometimes.
and if you follow the news, I mean, Spirit had a complete meltdown for a week.
Oh, yeah.
A couple weeks ago. American had a 3 or 4 day meltdown, so there are a lot of factors, that go into it. Weather often is weather or mechanics is often a trigger. If everything works on schedule, everything works, but as soon as some hiccup happens, it just starts falling apart.
Just by not knowing the industry as well as you do, but they won't let a passenger book if the layover is not long enough. Yet right now, they seem to be booking pilots and flight attendants with a very small window.
Yep.
To where most of the delays I'm experiencing, you're waiting for the crew to show up.
And example of that is my, you know, flight back from Boston. I had my second segment was LaGuardia to Traverse City, and we waited an hour on the airplane because they didn't have a captain. They had a spare, but he was over at JFK, so he had to come across town to LaGuardia to then get us into Traverse City, because we were originally delayed an hour, which caused that crew to time out, which is exactly that issue. It's not fun flying right now, honestly. Moving on, August is right now a mirror image of July, potentially a little bit worse. More so the weather issues, August, a little bit less the mechanical issues with the Technums. We've actually had most days recently operating fully with Technums. So we've kind of gotten past some of those changes, that'll freed up the Technums to be flying again. But the lack of capacity, our travel peak, as I've seen for, you know, years now, is we pick up the last weekend of June, and this past weekend is kind of the end, so our very short peak season is really that window. So the rest of the month, we're starting to see numbers come down for Cape Air, especially on the midweek flights, the Tuesday and Wednesdays. And that also, if you think about it with Cape Air, especially, so for example, most weekends this summer, from midday Wednesday through Saturday, at that kind of 3-day window, they're gonna operate 12, if you include Wednesdays, 14 flights. We were often sold out, all 14 of those flights. So if they have any hiccup that causes them to cancel, those passengers don't have a next flight to go on until, you know, often 2-3 days in the future, which then is why a lot of people have been going into Traverse City as a result of that. And then Sunday, Monday has been the reverse flow of that. Once things start coming down and we're, you know, got 4 or 5 on a flight, that cancels. Well, now we've got 2 more flights this afternoon that those passengers can get rebooked on, so Cape Air can recover internally much more easily when they're not operating at 90% loads. So August, really looking, very similar to July. September and October still look very good versus all my historical metrics. We've got more, because it's now the shoulder season, we've got more capacity than we traditionally have had. But there's a definite slowdown in bookings that I'm seeing, and I suspect it's because of the Delta variant COVID issues, that people are just like, whoa, let's see where things are gonna be in a month before I'm gonna book for this fall. So, you know, depending on what happens on the COVID front, September and October should be very good, but may be depressed, if, you know, we see a continued uptick in, COVID numbers.
I think you're right on that.
Last slide, marketing. So Stacy, and I cannot think of her last name, is Cape Air's new Midwest Region marketing manager. She was here for a day and a half at the end of July. She met with myself and Brandon Jensen for one day. She got a basically community-wide tour with the chamber. The second day, she and I did dinner the night in between. It was a really productive meeting, and I think she's going to be really good at her job as she basically comes up to speed. And kind of touched on this. This is one of the things that actually came out of the discussion with Stacy when she was here, is I'm seeing a leveling off of our bookings, and the assumption I had was, well, when you're at 90% capacity, you just don't have the seats to sell. But as we were working through some of the data that Brandon Jensen was bringing in, we're also seeing a significant drop-off in just travel to our website, which doesn't necessarily correspond to what I was assuming was the issue. I was assuming the issue was, you know, people are coming, trying to book, and then not finding any seats, and then having to make other plans. But there's actually a significant drop-off in people actually coming to the website. Now, we've reduced marketing this summer because, you know, we knew we didn't have the seats to sell, so we wanted to basically save those dollars for periods of the year where we, you know, could push more marketing. But the level of drop-off and the level of marketing decline don't necessarily correspond. So we're still trying to figure out, is that COVID related? Is it something we don't yet understand?
Barry, I would think that if people don't need to go to your website to book, that would probably be the driver and why the website's not getting hit as much.
That is another factor on that. But it is, people, unfortunately, people should go to our website to book. And this may someday get fixed, but this was, again, something when I was at Cape Air, I worked through with them trying to understand, is that you can find better fares through our website when we route you through Google's search engine than you can find directly on American's website. So if you go through our website, do a search, you'll find an American fare. You click through and you can purchase it on American, but if you start your search at American, they will not show you that fare. The issue is that because of the code share with American's got a price for the routes. Then there's the inner line, which is combining the American segment with the Cape Air segment, which can often be a cheaper alternative. But in American's booking engine, it's the same flight, so we're not going to show you these duplicate. We're going to show you only the American branded one at the higher price point. It's a valid flight. They can book it, but the way they present fares, it never shows up. So it's just, some of these things you learn are fascinating, and trying to understand how to best direct people to get the best fare, is interesting. In fact, you know, one of the discussion topics we had is it actually helping us to have the code share with American, or is the interline, like we have with United, sufficient? Because if we didn't have the code share with American, all of these other fares would be showing up. So it's interesting. I think there's still value, but we'll see. That's the end of my report.
Okay.
Are there any further questions?
I just want to go back to the camera system. I know you said you haven't gotten the training yet, so you don't know how long the retention is.
Right.
Once the system's up and running, are there any insurance requirements or any, FAA regulations as to what that retention period has to be?
There is nothing that I am aware of, no.
Is there any benefit in a reduction in the insurance policy once they're told?
I haven't inquired about that. Not something crossed my mind, but, I
Good questions.
definitely will follow up with that.
All set, Barry?
Yep.
Okay. Moving on, old business, I was talking to Phil before we got the meeting started. He was going to give us a little report on the air show stuff that he mentioned last week. So Phil, floor is yours.
Yeah, I talked to a person that, was a member of, was a member of the car club. They have since closed up, they're no longer a club. There's a number of factors as to why they decided to call it quits, but they're no longer a club. So I will keep, an eye out. There's gotta be other ones than just that one that, may be interested. I don't know, but I will.
I saw on a billboard, there's that Labor Fest coming up, Labor Day weekend, and, I'm pretty sure it was the billboard advertisement that it showed that there's a car show. So I don't know if that's a different club, if that would be.
That is a different one.
Okay.
Yes, that's a different one than what I had thought of. Yeah, I'm gonna go to that one if they still have it, because they're talking about having it down at the, First Street Beach, and I don't know if they're gonna be able to fight around the rocks and the, and all the stuff that's down there, all the construction equipment for fixing up that, the river walk there. But I'll go to that show and talk to someone there and see if there's any interest, by them, and what the basic, how it basically works, 'cause I'm not really sure how it works.
Okay.
So, yeah, so the one that was having the, show, on the 4th of July, they're defunct, they're out of business.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Okay, moving on, Barry said he's got some new business, so we'll pick that up. It's involved with automatic hanger safety locks on the Cape Air leased hangar.
So we touched on this earlier. So our hangar, which, you know, was basically transferred to us from, Ted Aaron's, that we are leasing to Cape Air. When we took over that hangar, there was questions about the integrity of the door, so we brought this firm out to basically do a assessment and then some maintenance on the door, to basically say that the door was fine, to operate once it was, repaired or brought, maintained. Over time, I am aware of at least 4 times, so these big doors, you know, there's a mechanism that basically operates them to make them move up and down. But when they're in the closed position, there's generally some sort of additional locking mechanism that basically is designed to prevent wind gusts from causing any movement. Those locks need to be released before you attempt to open it, otherwise bad things happen.
Those locks are, they're manual, correct? If I-
And
yeah,
the locks installed when this hangar was built were manual. At least 4 times that I'm aware of, twice now by Cape Air and twice before Cape Air, including once by myself, the locks weren't properly released and damage has been caused twice by this. Each time we put up bigger signs that basically tell people to make sure that the locks are released before they operate. But especially with Cape Air now, they've got multiple people that are going through, crews rotate in and out, they get substitutes, they bring maintenance people in from St. Louis. Just the more people that touch it, the more opportunity there is for mistakes to happen. And it happened again. No one fessed up to doing it, and the maintenance person came in one day and said, wow, do you know what happened? Like, no, I don't. And no one reached out to me and said, oh, yeah, I made a mistake. But in the last iteration, the same issue, but there was a little bit of damage to one of the cables. Powerlift came out and said it was okay to operate, but after a period of time, one of the cables failed. So the hangar was basically unusable for about 10 days to 2 weeks until I could get them come out to repair it. The repairs for this, Cape Air has agreed that they will pay, since someone of theirs, since they're leasing the hangar, that did it, even though we don't know who. But I asked Speed Wrench Powerlift here to give us a quote of solving the problem once and for all, and installing basically automatic latches that prevent this manual error from happening. So I'm coming to you, since this is outside my spending authority and it's not necessarily a budgeted item per se, to seek your approval to move forward with this. I really think it's something we need to do, because at $2,000 a repair job, and for something that has now happened multiple times, I think this is the right long-term solution to the problem. So that's my explanation for what you have in front of you. Any questions?
Barry, we provide fire watch, there's a note down there for fire watch when you're cutting torches and so on. We got somebody to do fire watch if they need it?
Yeah, we've even got a fire truck on.
Oh, yeah, well,
on
I'm just
site,
checking, there's a note down there,
Yep.
you know.
Yep.
Is this cost specific to the door that's out there, or is it reusable? 2 years from now, somebody says, all right, that door, we thought we could salvage it, but it can't be.
This is specific to that door. It's a, Schlag? Not
Schweiss.
Schweiss. It's a Schweiss door, and this is the Schweiss door system for doing this.
How confident are we, or how certain are we that that door is gonna be there for a number of years?
I see from talking with these guys, they have no qualms that this is a good quality door and it doesn't have any issues other than, you know, what we've been kind of stressing it with these breaks.
Andrew, from what I've seen and heard of the door, I would tend to agree with what Barry said.
This is the standalone hangar that we received from Ted Ahrens.
Yes,
Correct.
that is what this is.
And I would agree with Barry for wanting to go ahead and put this mechanism on the door, because one of the times that the door failed, I was out there with a couple other guys and we caused the failure. Barry wasn't alone causing the failure. and it was very
I
simple
was
to do
pushing the
it.
button.
Yeah, I know, it's very simple to do. No matter how big the sign is you got up there, you don't understand what the sign is telling you. So anyway, I recommend we go ahead and pursue this automatic device on the door. Do I have a motion to that effect, or
No, I have a
more
question.
comments? Question?
How much of this would be paid for by Cape Air? None of it.
I'm not suggesting that Cape Air would pay for this, because they're paying the damage, invoice.
Okay.
Well, you don't need a motion today. All you need to do is say, yeah, go get a bid and find out what the cost is gonna be. If you get the bid and you wanna pursue it, then you need to find out what then you gotta have the motion to approve since it's not a budgeted item.
We have the bid. We have the bid.
I don't think it's.
Oh, you do
Oh,
have the bid.
Sorry, I'm
Yeah,
not sharing my screen.
Yeah, it's $6,381.94.
Sorry about that, Jeff.
Oh, that's fine.
I thought I was sharing my screen.
Is this one different? 6,381.94.
Sorry. I'm looking at 6531. That's what I was looking at.
After
Oh,
the
okay.
supplies are added,
Shop supplies of $150.
a lot of paper towels.
So it depends on which ones you buy. If you buy Bounty, it's not much.
So I make the motion that we send the 53194
Right.
to repair that door with the auto lock.
And while you're making the motion, it probably would make sense to identify what budget line item this comes out of and make a adjustment to the budget at the same time, or if you wanna do all budget adjustments at the end of the
I do budget adjustments all at the end of the year.
year. Okay, so then we don't need that right now.
So I will second that motion.
One clarifying question. I don't know if this is under the airport board PMPs or whether this falls under the county. Is one bid sufficient?
I would say,
Is there even another company that can bid it?
I'm not aware of anybody
So
else.
do we need to have like some sort of sole source form or something that explains why there's only one bid?
Just document it.
good point, because this company we're talking about is a company that's well-known through the Midwest, that provide a lot of these.
And that's all I'm saying, is just so
It's
that
a very
whoever
specialized.
comes behind us, there's some sort of something memorializing why there's only the one bid.
Right, okay. Good one. More comments?
I'll just add, onto this is that, Cape Air, we are getting $12,000 a year right now in rent for this hangar, so.
Somebody else keeps trying to get in here.
Yeah. I'm gonna shut it.
Okay. Billy, could we have a roll call on the proposal?
Yes. Mr. Peterson?
Yes,
Ms. Kaminsky?
Oh, yes, sorry, wasn't turned on.
Ms. Goodman?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Haw?
Yes.
Mr. Suda?
Yes.
Mr. Gentili?
Yes.
So there it is, passed, and, the comment that Andrew made, I guess we put that in there someplace. Document that this was a single quote by the manufacturer
Specialized.
for a specialized door. Yes, makes sense to me. So, any more, kind of winding on down on the agenda and our program for today? Any comments by authority members? Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple of them. A while ago, we talked about signage, whatever, to keep Cape Air from parking in basically what I'm going to say, the general aviation area. And, there's no signage up there yet. The other comment I would have would be the access gate, that we paid a lot of money for card readers for and whatever, the access gate's been left open an awful lot of the time recently. Comments?
Noted, and I,
Okay.
I've
Any
got
other-
some clarity for you on your question, Barry, in regard to, the study for wages. Since nobody involved is a county employee, it would not pertain.
what, say
Did
that
you
again?
say it again?
So you asked the question earlier in the meeting about a wage classification study, and that is being done. And I contacted Lisa, and in regard to this, since none of it is what I assume, since none of the personnel are direct county employees, it would not pertain to that. So you wouldn't be able to include it into the study.
Okay. So I guess while I'm technically a contractor, again, I'm looking for help for the board to have some guidance as to, where my salary should lie. And, you know, that's one of the reasons I brought this up.
Well, I guess what I would tell you to do is contact 6 other airports with very similar size populations and service. And that's what we generally base all of our stuff off of. That would give you a good starting point.
There you go. Any other comments by authority members?
One other question, and that is when will, I don't recall the time frame on when we go out for bids for the EAS service. When will we start seeking the bids?
That's right.
So the current contract, ends end of next September. DOT usually starts the process 6 to 9 months before that. So somewhere between January and April is when I would expect them to start that process.
Okay, so we hear from them before we seek the bids?
DOT runs the process, so, you know, they just, you know, start by releasing an RFQ, for, air service.
Okay, thank you.
Aaron, you had a comment?
I was just gonna ask why we don't have our HR person doing that informal study of, wages? Why are we putting it back on Barry? Your thoughts for that?
Well, Karen, all I can say is Barry asked a question about that prior to. I don't have any problem with that. If we want to have Julie do that, that's fine.
Okay. It's just typically that would be your HR would do a small sample survey. We do that all the time. And it's easier for an HR person to get that information than another manager.
And again, I'm looking at it from the perspective of, I obviously have a conflict of interest in how I'm getting that information, but it's information the board should have as they're trying to figure out what's fair.
I think it's a good thing for Julie to do.
The only thing of it is, that's fine, but if we had the locations as opposed to trying to figure out where to search, because I'm sure Barry can come up with 6 off the top of his head as opposed to Julie trying to scratch and figure out which areas to contact that have something very similar to what we're doing. So if we could get those contacts and then let Julie run with it, that's fine.
Way to do it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Barry, you've got all that?
I did.
Okay. Any other comments? Not, meeting adjourned.